International Film Festival, The Hague.
Yes.
So I know Savarna through Michael, who got me to bring her in and interview her, and she's in my second book, after Flipside, after this film. Have you seen this goofy film that they just showed people?
I have. It's interesting to see Pete and Paul with more hair.
That's true. And then ultimately, I did another film recently called Hacking the Afterlife, where I took some of the footage, from that and put that in with other people. I've got to tell you that, so I've been working with a medium who works with law enforcement here in Los Angeles. She has been for the past 8 years. We do a podcast. Anyway, we asked Michael to come through, and he did come through. It's in the film Hacking the Afterlife, and he talked about the hair. He said the same thing. Isn't that funny? They're doing
Okay.
fixing up business. Don't worry about it. That's great. I love that you have those books prominently on your shelf. That's very cool.
It's kind of good for people to know that there are actually books.
Yeah, that's true. Well, tell me, do you have a website so I can tell friends of mine?
Yeah, it's sfbayregressions.com.
Okay, very good, because frequently the topic comes up. A friend of mine is a therapist in Berkeley this weekend, and I've been talking about this stuff for a long time now. Notice I have a red carpet behind me, in honor of films.
Yes, that's great. I didn't know I was coming, so I didn't have anything really to prepare.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry about Pete's mom. I'm sorry to hear that. So I guess she lives in Melbourne?
Hello?
She lives in Sydney, and she has not been doing well for like the last 6 months. And Pete has moved north. He's moved to Cairns, which is way up at the northern tip of Australia.
Hi.
And he works
Hello.
almost
This
totally.
is,
Hello.
Sorry.
Hi, we are calling from The Hague.
I'm we're
Anshu
here
Verma.
where Diana and I can hear you very well. Are you going to go
Great.
live, Avnish?
Great. Avnish, so
Wait.
can I start the Q&A session?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes. Thank you very much. But for your audience's information, Mr. Peter Smith of MNI, Michael Newton Institute, will not be able to join. And Executive Director, Ms. Diana Paque, she will be addressing the questions. And Mr. Richard Martini will be definitely able to help. So now I'm sitting in front of the live audience who are who have witnessed your Journey of Soul, that film. Just now we have completed the screening of the film, and let me directly address the audience if they have any questions.
Well, can we see you? Can you put us on Zoom so we can actually see what's going on? Not really. Okay, this is new information. So let me ask you some questions. You can see us. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Definitely, the audience can also see both you, Richard Martini, and Ms. Diana Paque.
Okay. All right, so to give us, listen, I am a film director. So to give us some context, Diana and I just met online. We're meeting for the first time. Pete Smith, who is, as you know, the president of the Newton Institute. He's in Australia and he wasn't able to make it today. Diana and I haven't met before, but it's wonderful for her to be here. I have worked with, maybe a dozen or maybe more Newton Institute trained hypnotherapists, and I know how talented they are, and I know how giving they are, and I know how much work it takes. So first, allow me to say, if you don't mind, before we get to questions, thank you for coming to see this film. thank you for attending the film festival. In honor of your film festival, I have put behind me a photograph I took from the Cannes Film Festival, because I go there often. And since we can't be in The Hague today, a wonderful, famous city for giving peace and focusing on peace throughout the world. So I'm very honored, and I'm sure Diane is too, to be invited, even at the drop of a hat at the last minute, to your festival. And let's, if we may, let's let Diana talk a little bit about her journey and to this path, to this moment in time, so that at least we understand where we're coming from.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you, Rich. Ms. Diana Paque, can you introduce yourself?
So my name is Diana Paque. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I have been a hypnotherapist for about 15 years, and I have been a Newton therapist since 2016. And I was trained by Pete and by Paul and by Jimmy Quast, all of whom were in this film. And at this point, I am the executive director of the Newton Institute. I followed in this position after Pete moved out of being president. We changed our structure. And so I am involved in leading this organization into the future. And I am particularly thankful to Avnish for bringing this film to the world, because what we do as Newton workers is that we are wanting to spread access to consciousness and to help people connect. And as you can see in this film, people connect very deeply when they're given the opportunity, but they have to learn about it. So how do they learn about it? And that you're bringing this film gives more people a window into something that many people have never even heard of or knew that they could connect with. So this work is very personal, it's very individual. People have profound journeys. They go into past lives. And what's different about Michael's work, as he talks in the film, is that not only did he take people into past lives, he's taken people into the space between lives when they're no longer in a body. And they are able then to speak from the level of their souls, looking at the whole of their existence and asking questions about why this? Why us? Why does this happen? Why am I here? Who are these people that I'm wandering around with? And all of the questions that we want to know about, because we're caught in an incarnation where we can't see that most of the time. So it's a very exciting journey, and I'm glad that Rich made this film now 12, 13 years ago, that really expressed what this journey is about and gave you an inkling of what it's like to experience it yourselves. So I'm open to whatever questions you have.
Very good. And if I may introduce my journey just a little bit, like Diana. So in my case, it was a close friend of mine, as I mentioned in the film, close friend of mine, Luana Andrews, passed away in my arms and then started visiting me. And the jaded Hollywood skeptic that I was, I thought, well, I must be making this up. And somewhere along the line, as I mentioned in the book Flipside, I met somebody in London, and while I was shaking his hand, I heard Luana's voice in my head say, well, this is why you're in London. And I thought, okay, that's very strange. I'm hearing her, and I'm hearing new information from somebody not on the planet. And when I shook this fellow's hand, I felt like I knew him, and then some months later, tragedy befell him, and his daughter passed away, and I reached out to him and said, you know, I wonder if hypnotherapy might help you. And he wrote me back and said, I have an appointment with a Newton-trained hypnotherapist this week. And I was like, what's that? And so I picked up a copy of Journey of Souls, which Diana has over her shoulder. And in the first chapter, there was the conversation somebody having while under hypnosis saying, I'm in a classroom on the other side, we're dealing with spirituality when everyone is dressed in white. Now that is something my friend Luana had said to me repeatedly before she passed. She had this recurring dream. When I mentioned it to her hospice care nurse, she said the same thing. Oh my gosh, that was her recurring dream. And the day she passed away, a friend called and said, I had the most wonderful dream last night. We found our friend Luana was in the fourth dimension, she said, in a classroom, dressed in white, and seemed very happy about being there. And I thought, well, I have the capacity to make a film about this sort of thing. So I contacted Paul Oren, who was then president of the Newton Institute, and I suggested a film. And he said, well, Michael's retired, so I don't think he'll want to, but maybe you should bring your cameras to one of our workshops, and we will, if you give us a copy of that, of whatever you shoot. I said, oh, that's great. I think that's a great idea. So I went to Chicago. I started filming. The woman who recalled being in Auschwitz, that was the first footage that I shot, and I was in shock hearing what she was saying. And then at some point during that week, they suggested that I try a session, which I thought, oh, what a perfect opportunity for me to prove to myself that it's not accurate, that maybe, and Jimmy Quast, who was in the film, was the person who did my session. And I was prepared for 4 hours to say, I don't see anything, if I didn't. But Jimmy's very good at what he does, as Diana knows. And somewhere into that journey, he said, well, just look down, what do you see? And from there, the door is all open. It was like the garden gate was open, and I could see and hear and learn new information about things that I wasn't aware of. And when I finished that session, I must say, I mean, I interviewed Pete Smith, as you see in the film, and Paul in the film. When I walked out of that session, I felt like the earth had shifted on its axis slightly, just a few degrees, because everything that I thought I had learned and knew was now up in the air, and it was subject to review. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 12 years, filming people. I've filmed over 200 sessions so far, thanks to all the Newton hypnotherapists who let me into their office, because I don't say anything. I just turn the camera on and be quiet. Maybe I'll pass a note. But half of those were using guided meditation, which is just a simple way of saying somebody who's already done hypnotherapy, somebody who's very good at hypnosis and doing it, or a guided meditation, somebody who's very good at that practice, especially people whose background is in meditation. I found that I can just start asking them questions directly without doing this 6 hours of, and I wrote a book about it. It's called, Divine Counsels in the Afterlife. Now, Divine Counsels came from Michael, because that's where I first read about them. And Michael talks about them a lot in his second book, Destiny of Souls. But in these guided meditations, I found that I could ask questions to council members about who they are, where they come from, how did they earn a role on this person's council. You wouldn't think, it's counterintuitive, you wouldn't think that I, who have never met this person before, could be asking their council, who's known them for all their lifetimes, questions about their journey. And in the book, I have 20 scientists who had never done anything like this before. They hadn't read anything of mine, and were not aware that you could talk to councils. Yeah. Let me just. Okay, but let me just finish this thought, my friend, which is to say that what it shows is that we are at the forefront of opening up the door to talking to consciousness on the other side. And that's what we need to be doing. And I thank you, Diana, for mentioning it, because she's doing it, this work is doing it, anyone can, and I highly recommend going to a Newton-trained hypnotherapist, because in the 4 to 6 hours, it lasts. It changes your life. Whereas what I'm talking about is something more along, let's examine a dream you had. And once you're done with that session, you go home. Anyway, go ahead, Avnish.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, if any question is ready, otherwise I will ask one. Okay. Pass on the mic.
Hi, I do have a question. I was thinking while looking at this film about people who feel like soulmates, right? So you meet them and instantly you click without having talked to them that much, or you just kind of know them, or you have the feeling you know them. How do you relate these people into the context of this film?
Diana,
I think
go ahead.
I think that is something that we connect with, that we have groups of people, groups of souls who go through lives together, and we don't necessarily know them, you know, as the individuals that they incarnate as, but our souls pick up the energy, because our souls are energy and they're all energy that's connected. So we're all connected. People, the souls who are working on it, are also working together, because we make agreements with souls to work on a contract together. So if you and, you know, Barbara are working on this contract, and you start, she's Barbara in the past life and now she's Mary in this life, and the two of you may not have completed it, so here you are in this life continuing to work on it. And sometimes one of the interesting things that I've been seeing lately is that souls may develop contracts for more than one life at a time. So in a past, when you look at a past life, you look at a life and you say, okay, I'm setting up this life, and I'm setting it up to do this and this and this. But what if I don't finish all that in one life? I'm choosing now to continue.
She's a hypnotherapist from New York, and she talked about not wanting to do some of the lifetimes that they offered her, that they were saying, what about this? And she was like, too much snow. I don't want to go there. But it's interesting. So, you know, as you think of it like a stage, you have an actor trying to work out details of their lifetime, and the theater director or the theater directors, they say, well, why don't we have two performances simultaneously so you can experience both of those things, the trauma and the joy, at the same time, so your soul won't be damaged. And like you say, almost like a 3D chess game, when you're playing a certain role here, it might not pay off for the Department of Perceptual Studies, Dr. Grayson, Dr. Tucker, Dr. Kelly. And what they've shown in their work is that consciousness is not confined to the brain. If you look up on YouTube, Dr. Grayson's talk from 2011, Is Consciousness Produced by the Brain? You'll see a lot of the data that shows that consciousness is not confined to the brain. In his work, Dr. Grayson's work, his book is called After, he talks about how you can get objective data from subjective experiences, which is a dream or a...
So basically, I am an Indian, and as such we believe in reincarnation. So I am not a skeptic. So I treat this work, which is going on by your institute as well as Dr. Brian Goss and Weiss and so many people, as equivalent to something like Darwin's biological evolution. There is a spiritual evolution has been discovered, and the scientific methodology of it is being refined by wonderful work by you guys. But this question is coming from Mr. Scott. His question is, how can we ensure the authenticity of this experience? Because it could simply be a guided hypnosis, and it may be a totally story which is coming out of the mind of a hypnotherapist or
If I could take that, Diana, let me start with that.
Sure.
I've been working with University of Virginia, the Department of Perceptual Studies, Dr. Grayson, Dr. Tucker, Dr. Kelly, and what they've shown in their work is that consciousness is not confined to the brain. If you look up on YouTube, Dr. Grayson's talk from 2011, Is Consciousness Produced by the Brain? You'll see a lot of the data that shows that consciousness is not confined to the brain. In his work, Dr. Grayson's work, his book is called After, he talks about how you can get objective data from subjective experiences, which is a dream or a hypnotherapy session, because you're experiencing it, it's subjective, when you ask everyone the same questions. That's how all drugs come to market. You know, the person who experiences using a drug eventually does a survey. It says, well, they answer the same questions. So when you can examine this kind of work, and what Michael Newton did in the estimated 7,000 cases that he and the Newton Institute were involved in, you can compare that data, those objective responses from subjective experiences because of the questions involved, with the work of Dr. Helen Wamba, who in the 1970s did 3,000 different case studies through psychologists, clinical psychologists. And you compare the answers with Dr. Weiss, you mentioned him, he's done 4,000 examples. You compare the data of the experience. I'll just give you one, which is in Michael Newton's interview for Flipside, he said there was never an incident that he was aware of where a soul came to the mother's fetus until the 4th month, after the first trimester. I mean, it's possible that there's people who come earlier, but in general, that's what he was saying. Dr. Wamba's research, out of her 3,000, she never had one person who said that they came before the 6th month. So in other words, we exist prior to incarnation. We plan our lifetimes with our counsel, our teachers, our guides, and then when we get here, it's about, and we bring a percentage, the average I think is between 20 and 40%. We bring that conscious energy to the life. And so that's data. And so how do you differentiate data from different people is you compare it, just the way they do with near-death studies. That's my point.
So the one part of the comment was, how do you know that it isn't simply a suggestion that is being given by the hypnotherapist? Hypnotherapy is about supporting the client in having their own experience. We provide the container. We don't provide the actual, what they actually experienced. So I may be taking you into a state of relaxation, and I suggest you go to a beautiful place. And recently I had a client who, her conscious mind was saying, I want to go to a meadow. I have this meadow in my mind that I really like. And she found herself being drawn into a grove of trees. It's like, but I want to go to the meadow, but she's going into the trees. And she could feel that conscious interference, that her mind was wanting to go to this place that she knew, but that wasn't where she was going. So she actually experienced that tension of something within her was taking her into that grove of trees. When we are in a state and we go into a past life and we start to experience it, our first experiences are pretty vague because you drop into a life without context. You don't know where you are. You don't know why you landed where you landed. And so you have to ground. And as you ground, you begin to get a sense of who you are. Once I have a client grounded as much as they can, which may not be very much, I take them all the way back to the beginning of their lives. So here you are, you're a young adult, you think you're male, so I'm going to take you all the way back to childhood, early childhood, on the count of 3. And now you are a small child. Tell me about you. I didn't provide I provided the suggestion, you are a small child. I didn't say you're a boy, I didn't say you're a girl, I didn't say where you are. So this is coming from somewhere inside of you. As someone goes through a life, if it is simply something that they're making up in their head, there's no emotional attachment to what they're experiencing or what they're reporting. But then when you have someone, all of a sudden they break down and they're in tears because their child has just died, if that's something you're just making up out of your head, it doesn't have an emotional connection for you. It's just a story. And time after time, one experiences emotional connections because they're accessing this deep emotional memory. So that's the primary thing that happens when one goes into these states, is one accesses memory that's not available when the ego, the conscious mind is online. The conscious mind is not interfering with that experience. This is a very experiential journey that one goes on. And the mind allows that to happen once the mind feels that the person is safe.
Thank you. So your conclusion is this, that this is a scientific methodology, and just like any other research, medical or any scientific research, this can be proved and it is repeatable.
Yes.
Any next question?
I will comment to the question.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. First to the producers.
Very active in that.
Thank you, Mr. Anna. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you for that
Mr.
answer.
Richard Martini.
Appreciate that.
Please convey our best regards to Mr. Peter Smith also. If any other questions are there in the audience, we'll write it to you and convey the results to them. Thank you once again on behalf of the
Thank you.
Festival Director, Dr. Avnish Rajvanshi, as well as the IFFH team.
Thank you, Avnish.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you very much,
Pieces ahead.
Diana. Thank you, Rich. Thank you for your participation. I think there are lots of questions here. So what I propose, if you agree, I will just take them and send it to you, and then we can communicate with them. Right now,
Excellent.
we need to close because the cinema hall has to close and people are waiting.
Time
Thank
to
you
go
very
home.
much.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks,
you everybody for attending. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Namaste. Namaskar.
Namaste.
Namaste.